Hello. Does this thing still work? Is it? Yeah, okay. Anyways, hello everyone, it's Sam, and I am finally back to working on content. If I'm being honest, I had absolutely no intention of working on YouTube for a long time, as both Vanguard and Modern Warfare Zombies did not excite me in the slightest in terms of making content. But how about that Black Ops 6 reveal, huh? If there was ever something that lit a fire under my ass to bring back my videos, that was it. Anyways, you're probably asking yourself, what the heck are we even doing here today? Well, dear viewer, since I promised reviews of both Vanguard and Modern Warfare Zombies at different points in time, I thought, what better way than to potentially lead into my Black Ops 6 content than look back at the Zombies modes of the last 2 years and talk about where we went wrong and how we even got to this point. If you're interested in a look ahead for my content, there will be a section at the end dedicated to what I've been doing and what my future plans are, so stay tuned. Well, with that out of the way, let's not waste any more time of me yapping, and let's get straight into this. So, instead of organizing this video like I did for my Cold War reviews or any of the other videos I've worked on, we'll be doing what I call organized yapping, and by that I mean I'm going to dissect / cross-examine these modes in a fairly loose structure via my script here. Starting off, let's talk about some specifics of these modes, why they exist, why they're hated, and the general consensus. Both Vanguard and Modern Warfare Zombies are children born from necessity, but not the necessity of zombies. Instead, it's the necessity of having a third mode. Now, it's no secret that the development of the last 5 or so years of Call of Duty has been hellish at its absolute worst. Devs being shifted around, plans changing, support getting yanked from under them, and several factors that brought us to where we are today. And in 2021, that delivered us Call of Duty Vanguard. Born from the fallout of Black Ops Cold War's development, Vanguard was Sledgehammer's latest take at a World War II era shooter. With its developmental cycle taking less than 16 months, it was obvious that a third mode would be needed, which meant enter Treyarch, swooping in with Vanguard Zombies, a prequel to Cold War's own zombie mode with new characters and innovations. While Treyarch kept pretty quiet about the specifics of the mode, we eventually got a reveal on October 14th, 2021, which featured multiplayer developers talking about the sightlines of their latest map, Duran Fong. Now, of course, no hate to them because they were just doing what they were told, but it was very clear from the offset that this would not be the same quality of Cold War Zombies a year before. And this assumption would be proven right on Vanguard launch day, when players finally got their hands on Duran Fong. The map was incredibly bare bones, ran like ass due to the switch from peer-to-peer connection to dedicated servers, had a slew of missing and unfinished features, including the pause button, and generally uninteresting gameplay. The mode was a weird amalgamation of Outbreak and Round Base, but accomplished neither of the goals that either mode set out to complete, which made it an absolute bore to play through. The core loop involved jumping through portals to complete a grand total of 3 objectives on launch to unlock portions of the Red Star multiplayer map. And once that was done, you cycled the objectives until you died of boredom. Now, this was obviously panned on launch. There was some cope from the community that maybe it would get better due to a rumored round-based map coming in Season 1, but when we got that roadmap, woohoo boy, we soon discovered we were going to be in this thing for the long haul. As a response to the lack of round-based, on 115 Day 2022, just before the Season 1 Reloaded update, Treyarch announced the addition of the Void objective, which was meant to be a pseudo-round-based objective that trapped players in the hut from Shin Onuma and had round-based-esque gameplay. However, it was really only round-based in name, because players still had to return to Red Star to interact with the perk fountains and the Altar of Covenants and the newly added Tome of Rituals. Vanguard would go on to see another objective-based map added during a second season named Terra Maledicta, which in truth was just Duran Fong with a new coat of uglier paint. This map did feature an Easter egg quest of sorts, but in reality it was a couple of objective rounds with some story-relevant dialogue thrown in the mix. It wouldn't be until Vanguard Season 4 that we finally saw the return of round-based zombies with Shin Onuma Reborn, which admittedly was quite fun, but even then it was round-based at its most bare bones. This brings us to the final slap in the face for this game, the Archon. Serving as the finale of Vanguard Zombies' story, the Archon exists to simply just close off all its loose ends. The map was simply Terra Maledicta with a green filter and some slightly shifted geometry to make it appear different. It featured a decent enough boss fight, but ended without a true conclusion of any kind. The story of Vanguard's cycle will definitely be studied in the COD Zombies fandom for years to come, but at that time what gave us hope was that Modern Warfare 2 was coming up, and that game did not have a zombies mode in it. Which is what I would have said if Zombies wasn't revealed for Modern Warfare 3 following that game's announcement. This time around, the mode served as a sequel to the sequel that doesn't exist yet. And if that doesn't make any sense, let me just say it one more time. Modern Warfare Zombies is a sequel to Black Ops 6, which is releasing this October. Anyways, Treyarch this time around took a completely different approach to zombies in general, and that was to take the skeleton of Infinity Ward's DMZ mode and put zombies in it. MWZ sees 24 players enter Urzikstan in squads of 3 and has them completing contracts and other small things for rewards and schematics, a new system to guarantee yourself items like a flawless Ethereum crystal or the fabled ray gun. The game also featured 3 story acts, which, similar to DMZ's quest system, that had different missions to do which ultimately culminated in a cutscene with relevant plot information. While this mode fared better with the community even after its reveal, with Activision going as far as to say that this was the most popular third mode of all time, it would soon be revealed that not at all was as it seemed. In Season 1, Treyarch dropped a trailer highlighting the new Dark Aether Rift edition, which gave players the chance to face a harder experience from the base game in an attempt to earn new schematics. While the new Rift was a fun addition to the game, once it was beaten, there was little to no reason to replay it, as its difficulty did not make for a fun, repeatable experience. Later in the release of Season 1 Reloaded, for Modern Warfare 3, all the mode got was a new warlord in the form of Dokebi, and this was the beginning of the end for the mode. Following that update, Season 2 of Modern Warfare 3 was revealed, and it was shown to be a zombie-centric season, with clips of promotional material featuring several zombies-themed aspects on Fortune's Keep, as well as The Walking Dead's Rick Grimes being the main feature of that season's battle pass. But as soon as Zombies fans got their hopes up, we were immediately slapped in the face with the reality that not only was all of that promo for content inside the Warzone experience, but the little content that Zombies was getting was saved for Season 2 Reloaded, which would still have been a month away at that point. This new content was another new Rift and story mission, 3 new schematics, and a new warlord, which was hardly anything to speak of considering the wait of 2 months between significant updates. This cycle would continue for Season 3, and in Season 4 it would be an absolute laughingstock, as the only update to Zombies coming in Season 4 is the addition of the Unstable Rift, which I would have said is some kind of round-based stand-in, but seeing as this video has released after Unstable Rift has come out, no, it's not. And on top of that, Season 5 is the conclusion of Modern Warfare Zombies, with another new Rift and story mission, and 3 new schematics, one of which being a feature in the game that should have just been there to begin with. But I digress. So with the introduction for both of these modes out of the way, I'm going to just jump right into the thick of it here, and start with the fact that these modes are surrounded and bogged down with Undercooked ideas. Since both of these modes are made for other games and not for a Treyarch game themselves, the team essentially used them as testing grounds for new concept and gameplay loops for Zombies. Unfortunately for us players, that meant playing modes chock full of half-baked ideas and incomplete plans, which were just time wasters in the lead up to the main event, Black Ops 6. Modern Warfare Zombies schematic system and Vanguard Zombies Covenants are both equally underutilized and undersupported, but whereas Covenants have a few small tweaks to make them worthwhile, the schematic system is flawed down to a fundamental level. In Vanguard, Covenants are a roguelike system in which the player trades corrupted hearts for a rotating stock of small buffs like more melee damage or the ability to collect more salvage from each pickup. Purely based on the description, the system sounds fine, enough for the vision of Vanguard Zombies, that is. Unfortunately, due to certain factors, it never truly reaches that potential. Right off the bat, a major flaw is a lack of variety in Covenants, which seems weird seeing as this system should lend itself to an incredible amount of creativity. Instead, most of the upgrades are just pieced out and watered down versions of the perk upgrades from Cold War. Things like Death Perception salvage increase, or hell, even Deadshot's most basic function, are split up and parted out into what is essentially an undead slot machine. Due to this lack of variety, the builds that the game wants you to try out and play around with essentially boil down to a couple of separate playstyles, some of which include run and gun, camping, explosives, and melee damage. This dominoes into my next point, and that is the randomness of the Covenants is almost entirely counterintuitive to how the game wants you to play. Since there's so much slop in the system to entice you to try something new, the things you actually want are buried beneath a mountain of crap. Now, this isn't to say that the system should give me exactly what I want when I want, always, but without any way of re-rolling the Altar of Covenants besides progressing the game, and potentially putting myself at a disadvantage damage-wise, it's clear there's a flaw here. As I said a bit ago, the system could be fixed incredibly easily. All they need to do is allow for players to manually re-roll the altar to allow for easier access to the covenants that the player actually wants. That way, the randomness can be controlled in a sense and offer a risk-reward system for the Curse Hearts. On top of that, by adding more varied covenants that cover different abilities to actually enhance the build diversity, this would give players the choice to craft builds that work to their specific playstyles. Switching gears over to MWZ, the schematic system is another feature that in concept seems interesting, but completely falls flat on its face. Within MWZ's reward rifts, the player can sometimes receive schematics, which if successfully extracted, give the player the chance to craft said item once per its cooldown timer. Now, in theory, this means that you can be dropping into the OZ with a fully decked out character, all perks, a wonder weapon, pack crystals, ether tools, etc. However, the cooldowns are so wildly out of balance that it throws the entire system in for a loop. Let's take, for example, the Epic Ether Tool and the Flawless Ethereum Crystal. Now, the Epic Ether Tool is a schematic that can drop in the Tier 3 zone, which means it's a bit of a harder find. And now, once used, the Ether Tool enters a cooldown of 10 hours, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but it is bordering on egregious. Now, the Flawless Ethereum Crystal, which immediately makes your gun Tier 3 Pack-a-Punch, can only be obtained by defeating Greylorn, a world boss that could be considered endgame content. After using this for one game, might I add, you must wait 3 real-life days before you can use it again. That means for one 45-minute match, plus 15 minutes of overtime, and potentially if you go into the Dark Ether some extra time, you can have a gun jump to Tier 3 Pack-a-Punch, and after you exfil, it's gone, and you're left with nothing but a stupid cooldown left in front of you. And that's not even the worst example. The classified section of schematics, which can be earned from the 3 Dark Ether Rift runs, has a timer of 2 in real life days. So, shit like the Dog Bone or the fairly new Sergeant's Beret are considered to be as powerful as a wonder weapon that it requires 2 days in between uses. Now, while I'd offer my advice on how to at least tweak this feature, I'm afraid I can't, because the entire concept is inherently flawed. And it would appear that Treyarch or Sledgehammer even agree with me, because with Season 4's Unstable Rift, the reward for completing the event is that it completely refreshes all your cooldowns of the gear you brought in with you. Nope, no, fuck whatever else I was about to say. With the release of the Season 4 Reloaded update, the Unstable Rift was not a solution to the problem like it was advertised, but in fact, the problem in and of itself. See, all the information we were given about this rift turned out to be total bullshit. And in fact, the rift was a 5-round gauntlet in which the game throws as much as it possibly can at you, and cannot be repeated in a single match like previously shared by the COD blog. So basically, there is no solution to this problem, and the developers have essentially just dangled one in our faces and took it away. Nice. Okay, back on track here. While this could have been a nice band-aid for the issue, this fix reeks of solving the very problem we created, in a similar way to Golden Pack-a-Punch from Togger Totem. The problem isn't the waiting, but if you want to keep player retention, the answer probably isn't to force players to put the game down and come back when all their fun shit is off cooldown. Before I move on to the next section, I want to address some smaller things in both games that were also underdeveloped, but to a much lesser extent than the content mentioned previously. Now, since Vanguard was the immediate follow-up to Cold War Zombies, it was Treyarch's chance to act on some feedback that they received from the year prior. And this would manifest itself in the way in which players received their upgrades. So, instead of being persistent upgrades that go through every match, they made things like the perk and field upgrade tiers things that would have to be earned in each and every match, which is fine and dandy if the means of obtaining them were at all interesting. For perks, the player must purchase the same perk 4 times, once initially, and then 3 more to fully upgrade it, with each upgrade tier costing an increasing number of points for each purchase. This drastically changes the economy in Vanguard, and in Duran Vong and Terra Maledicta, forces the player to rely on objective completions to afford literally anything, since point distribution is entirely fucked. As for MWZ, the Act system and Dark Aether rifts are painfully underused. When Treyarch moved us into the seasonal story, the implication was that Act 4 would have some more missions to tackle besides the main story mission, but no, that wasn't the case. And as we moved on, the next 2 story missions after the one featured in Season 1 would follow the same format, meaning it was a one and done scenario. This translated horribly onto the Dark Aether rifts, which all melded together and are one and done runs. Which would be fine, I guess, if whoever is working on this mode decided to not make the reward rifts random in the Elder Dark Aether. See, the regular rift runs simply offer the new items themselves. It's the Elder Dark Aether which gives the players the chance to earn the new schematics, which means tackling an even greater challenge. Now, in Rift 1, the schematics were guaranteed. 3 contracts, 3 schematics, done and dusted. But with Rifts 2 and 3, there are still 3 contracts and 3 schematics, but unfortunately for you, fucko, no guaranteed schematics, which, if you're like me, means there's an opportunity to do all the work for the Elder run and get absolutely nothing for your time. Or you can be like Belinsky Paradox over here, who got every single schematic from the Rift 3 run. And if you couldn't tell, I'm still salty about that. The next topic I'd like to address, which is perhaps one of the biggest to a lot of people, is the storyline for these 2 modes. See, since we have a prequel and a sequel on our hands, they suffer from 2 very distinct issues that have little to no correlation with each other. While Vanguard is a prequel with brand new characters that it has to force the players to care about, on top of dealing with the fact that none of its information is relevant to Cold War since it was released after the fact, Modern Warfare Zombies suffers from an incoherent story and a critical misuse of its returning characters. Vanguard Zombies follows a core set of Dark Aether entities, which are stand-ins for the heads of Requiem in Cold War. Saraxis the Shadow, Belicard the Warlock, Nordicus the Conqueror, Victor the Destroyer, Dracana the Last, and Demonology Professor Gabriel Kraft round out our cast. And if those sound like a bunch of nonsensical names I conjured up, you'd almost be right. See, while the demons have some quirks to them and try to inject some more life into the game, it comes across as forced for a lot of the game's runtime, especially since there is no physical representation for a single one of them. In fact, Kraft is trapped in a little closet in Duran Fong, so the player never actually gets to see him. And on the villain side, we have Oberfrieder Wolfram von List, who is bad guy TM, and Cortifex the Deathless, both of whom are comically shallow, and Saturday morning cartoon levels of evil. No one on the cast besides Saraxis and Cortifex are ever fleshed out. But again, since this is a prequel to Cold War Zombies, much of what happens in this game is completely irrelevant and as such can be completely ignored. Vanguard, however, does have pretty well fleshed out lore and background info for the Dark Aether itself, but since there's no intel menu, many players will have completely missed these facts as we move on to Black Ops 6. You see, here I could just say, write better, lol. But seeing as the writer for this game actually follows me on Twitter, I can't and won't say that. Assuming I can't change the release schedule and Vanguard Zombies still has to be a prequel that releases after Cold War, then I would A, put more of the demon stuff in the latter half of Cold War's intel so that way it feels more natural and ties together, and B, would have more concrete ties to Cold War in Vanguard itself. There are some small things, I can't lie, like the picture of Strauss in the Vanguard intro, and the fact that Endstation built the Wunderwaffe and shipped it off to the fuck-ups that were Devarahite, but let's get deeper. Let's start setting up some of the events in the Dark Aether that Cold War expands on, and, if the budget allowed it, show an actual cutscene of Zykov coming across Cortifex's body in the Dark Aether and consuming him. Assuming, of course, that that theory's true and it's not just made-up fanfiction. Now, Modern Warfare Zombies suffers from a plot that is essentially a great big runaround that, as far as this video is concerned, is going nowhere. The true folly of this mode is that it's crafting a story and dancing around details of a completely different story that is yet to even release. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's just draw some comparisons real quick. In Cold War, we had the return of some fan-favorite characters from Black Ops who didn't really get to do much as the franchise went on. This included SSO Grigory Weaver and Colonel Lev Kravchenko, who were great additions to make Cold War Zombies feel tied to Black Ops. Now, in Modern Warfare Zombies, we have Ravenov and Sergeant Thope McTavish, both of whom are essentially nothing more than radio heads that talk to us in the match when we do certain contracts. Thope is an even bigger waste, considering his only role is to remind the player that, hey, we finally have zombies in a Modern Warfare game. The big difference here is that where Cold War used its characters to have meaningful story beats, MWZ uses these characters to remind the player of different things / better games. MWZ also has some other random Operation Deadbolt characters like Hugo Barrera, SSO Selma Green, Helicopter Pilot Fang, Lucas Dobbs, and Crystal Miller, all of whom are about as deep as a puddle. You might be noticing a trend here between Vanguard and Modern Warfare Zombies, that being that it introduces characters that they just don't have the time to properly flesh out, which sucks because Cold War's characters were incredibly well developed by the end, and when we finally got to Forsaken, you actively cared about all of them, both the good and the bad guys. Trust me, no Zombies fan gives a fuck about Terminus outcomes or the fact that, newsflash, Zakhaev has been absent from this game's story since the Act 3 cutscene. Remember Zakhaev? He was a pretty big reveal in the Modern Warfare Zombies intro because he kind of died at the end of MW19. But yeah, you know, he's just gone and has been gone for that long. And I bet you didn't know that, did you? Anyways, these factors ultimately crumble the already weak knees of this mode's story. And to just really put the cherry on top of that, the story itself is just a weird thing about Ava Jansen being the fucked up test tube baby created by Eddie, probably, to harness the Dark Aether in some way. It's unclear how this will solve itself, since this video is going to be out before the final cutscene in Season 5 Reloaded, but what I do know is that my asshole solution would be to just make this game's story non-canon outright. However, since I want to be fair, my real answer would be to completely rework the over-reliance on Cold War and the future Black Ops 6, and instead wholly focus on a Modern Warfare-oriented story that involves Task Force 141 and the fallout of the Verdansk nuke. I know, shut up about the nuke, but hear me out. A story of 141 and the world being thrown headfirst into the Dark Aether as an entire city is wiped off the face of the map would be baller as hell, and would free us from any of this useless connecting story that isn't going to go anywhere from Modern Warfare Zombies currently. Leaving these shitty stories in the dust, let's get into the truth of these modes. That being the fact that, in both instances, they suffer from a lack of support from higher-ups, and in Modern Warfare Zombies' case, Treyarch themselves. Now, I want to preface all of this. I'm not throwing the blame on the devs. As I mentioned early on, it sounds like working on these games has been an absolute fucking nightmare. So I want to try and acknowledge the faults while being at the very least understanding of why it happened this way. So with that, let's jump into Vanguard. So like I said at the start, the mode was going. Well, not really strong, but definitely going without round-based. That would be until Treyarch announced in their blog detailing their plans for Cold War Year 2 that they would be pivoting to work on round-based and would no longer be adding any more objectives to Duran Fong and Terra Maledicta. While this was absolutely the right move, it meant that a lot of the planned content was cut. This means objectives, field upgrades, and most importantly, story beats were either redone or completely tossed in the trash. By making this change, Treyarch single-handedly killed all their forward momentum and spent time making experiences that would merely serve as band-aids over a much bigger issue. While Shinonuma Reborn is an incredibly fun time, even with all of Vanguard's underlying problems dragging it down, the Archon is quite possibly one of the worst Zombies maps of all time. So bad, in fact, that Treyarch had to release a blog post before the map drop that essentially admitted defeat and said, hey, we tried our best, but we put all of our effort into a boss fight you may or may not like, and we'll see you in the next game. Obviously, nobody knows what the true extent of their original plans were in both scale and story, but I have no doubt that it would have been infinitely stronger than Terra Maledicta again, but with a shitty green filter on it. Although, seeing as how Terra Maledicta itself was just worse Duran Fong, it probably would have been just as bad as Terra Maledicta was, so honestly, all of this said, I think we got the better ending. Now, as we move on to Modern Warfare Zombies, the situation is almost completely different than Vanguard. You see, as opposed to a vague trailer where multiplayer developers make really weird claims about zombies, MWZ had an incredibly open and clear explanation of just about everything that this mode was going to do and how it would play out. Treyarch shared a ton of information with YouTubers who attended an event at the studio in the summer of 2023, and it honestly looked like a brighter version of Vanguard Zombies. As we moved into the launch window, the communication was maintained, and it made a lot of us really hopeful for the year going forward. As we went into Season 1, as I previously mentioned, we got that trailer showcasing the new Dark Aether Rift, which, at the time, was an incredibly badass way to introduce the new content. But as the Season 1 Reloaded update came and went with only the addition of that new Warlord, the comms started to slow down, and when the bombshell that was the Season 2 roadmap dropped, it got even worse. Treyarch essentially went silent between the launch of the roadmap and the launch of the actual content in Season 2 Reloaded, and at this time, rumors started to swirl that Treyarch had moved on from the project, and both High Moon Studios and Infinity Ward had taken over support. This rumor mill would culminate in us learning through the YouTubers that Treyarch was moving on from MWZ and passing it off to Sledgehammer to finish the game's content cycle. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned is the layoffs that happened earlier this year. In January 2024, following the closing of the Microsoft Activision deal, tons of employees across Activision were laid off, with Sledgehammer seeing the brunt of the layoffs. So, with that in mind, you can kind of start to see how this is going to go wrong. With Sledgehammer getting stretched incredibly thin to finish out this already rushed game, it's clear that they aren't going to have the time to give this mode the love it could use and really needs. This can most definitely be seen with the Unstable Rift, which not only is not at all what was advertised, but has a ton of strings attached that just don't seem intuitive to gameplay. It sucks so hard to see this happen to this mode, because many, like myself, saw MWZ as a side mode that had way more time and passion put into it than Vanguard did. The final point on my yapping is that ultimately, these experiments fail to capture the fun of killing zombies. In previous games like Black Ops 3 and Cold War, the goal was still killing zombies, and both Vanguard and MWZ put systems in place that make that goal hard sometimes. Zombies is about survival, loading into a map, starting off with weak shit, only to become more powerful, but in the end, you will eventually die. These two modes both misunderstand that factor, and created experiences with zero endgame and a lack of genuine interest. This isn't to say that Zombies is exclusively round-based, because Outbreak and Cold War proved that it understood the assignment to maintain the core spirit of Zombies. But these modes lack so much of that shared identity, it's clear that these were merely tests of what Zombies could be. The most fun Vanguard ever gets is Shinonuma, and even that is with the largest asterisk on the planet. That isn't to say that there isn't fun to be had, but it's so fleeting and caged in small moments that it may as well have been non-existent. In all honesty, Duran Fong and Terra Maledicta are two sides of the same shit-covered coin, and the Archon is genuinely one of the least interesting and visually insulting maps we've ever gotten. Another knock against the objective maps is that both of them lean too heavily on longevity, which they don't possess to be fun, which ultimately means the player is left with a nothing burger of a game. And with MWZ, the core gameplay loops almost immediately expire the second you collect every schematic. Unless you're a camo grinder or someone who is absolutely nutso bonkers like Joseph Weeks and goes for that useless weapon mastery business, there is nothing pushing you to come back to the game. On top of that, the schematic timers are actively punishing you for simply using the things you earned. Despite being able to cut their time down with X-filled points, it isn't nearly enough to be meaningful and make the experience fun. And on top of even that, the game has a fucking match timer, so when you use that Scorcher schematic that takes 2 days to cool down, you really only have an hour with it before it's gone. Honestly, it's no way to incentivize the player to use the things that they earn, and honestly only makes me understand why players have left the mode as time has gone on. Now, I've yapped a lot, and honestly, most of it's negative. However, that's not to say that I ultimately hate these two experiences. In fact, there's a lot I like about them in each of their own regards. I put a considerable amount of time in both modes, not just for this video, but just on my own time, and I never want to see Zombies fail. It's just that the circumstances behind these games has kneecapped them significantly to the point where it's hard to uncover the things I like under all the shit stacked on top of it. With these modes behind us, and behind Treyarch more specifically, I hope they can learn from these experiences to craft better games for us in the future. And, most importantly, with Black Ops 6. Now, for the section you may or may not have even been waiting for, the future of my channel. Honestly, I really didn't think I would be making any content again, like I said in the intro, but Black Ops 6's mere existence has really pushed me to do this. I really want to cover that game, just because I'm a Black Ops shill, but who knows, maybe Big Sam will be back. I don't know if my coverage would be of the whole live service like I did with Cold War, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see. I do really want to revive my channel, and would be super interested in making reviews for other games, and even Zombies maps in the meantime, between, or even during Black Ops 6's lifecycle. Hell, maybe I'll even make an opposite video to this one to detail the things I think worked in Vanguard and Modern Warfare Zombies. But that's all for later. And really, please don't be afraid to let me know if there's something you want to see from me. My Twitter DMs are always open, and I always read the comment sections of my video, so yeah. I want to thank you all for checking out my video, even after this 2-year-long hiatus. And anyways, I hope you have a wonderful day, everybody.
In Tier 3, you'll encounter the good players and some of the bad. Oh, fuck.
You're not supposed to be the one that goes down.
I'm gonna just keep that in the bit. Like, I'm gonna unmute this part of the video specifically and just keep that.
What the fuck? I'm gonna look like a fucking chomp! You can't do this to me.